Hi, everybody. Welcome to the sixth edition of the virtual lounge session on the fourth Sunday of November 2024. Before I hand you over to today's speaker, Mr. Sarabjit A Singh of 1961 batch,
61.
I would like to express my heartfelt thanks, first of all, for having agreed to take this session, and secondly, for having rescheduled it from the initial December date to November. That happened because Sayantan Chakravarti, who was scheduled for November, had some unexpected commitment elsewhere, and he has been rescheduled for January 2025. And I requested Mr. S. Singh to please consider taking up the slot in November, to which he very kindly agreed. Mr. S. Singh, of course, requires again no introduction. He retired as the Chief Administrative Officer of COFMOP, Central Organization for Modernization of Workshops, in the General Manager's grade, and was then the Member Administrative in the CAT, which is a post equivalent to the High Court judges. But probably the SAM community will not know his much about Mr. Singh before he joined Jamalpur. And I would like to share with everybody here that Mr. S. Singh was born in Lahore, in undivided India, and he distinctly remembers the perilous journey which the family had to take across the border from Lahore to Jalandhar when the partition took place. At that time, he was about 4 years old, and he has shared his experiences with the BBC. And as he says, that if it weren't for the partition, he would not be in Delhi, but he would be in Lahore. But that's not the subject for today. Today, he's talking about negotiating the Cold War and keeping the Mozambique railways running in the frontline state. It's a very exotic and unusual subject for a railway person. And very glad to now hand over the program to Mr. S. Singh.
Thank you, Ranjit, for this very generous introduction. And good morning to everybody. And thank you for giving me this opportunity of addressing and talking about of my experiences in Mozambique at the time in 1978, the time of the Cold War. But before I get into the actual presentation, I'd like to make a few comments. I'd like to indicate how it was at that time. In the 70s, India was in 1947, only 30 years since independence in 1977. It was about 30 years in independence. And I was little more than 30 years. So country was young, we were full of beans, and we were going to make India great. That was the feeling. And as civil servants, as officers, were quite well respected at that time. I don't know how well respected we are now, but at that time, the matter was a little different. Self-sufficiency was the mantra, and I was an RDSO as Deputy Director Motive Power dealing with lubricants. And when I signed off on the first indigenous crankcase soil RR 402, I felt that I had done a little bit for making India what it's going to be. Apart from that, we were building the commanding heights of the economy. Within the public sector, we were building plants, we were doing all that, and everybody required mechanical engineers. And mechanical engineers were basically only available in the railways. and Jamalpur. So we were much in demand. Many of the Jamalpur boys went and to set up BHEL and other public sector undertakings. Within the system, we were, I think, the department to be. We were looking after 10,000 steam locomotives. We were building production units. We were, introducing diesels. So we wanted within the railways, we wanted outside the railways, and we wanted abroad. That was the scenario in which it was. That was the time. And I think now I can, with this little introduction of what we felt at that time, let me get into the real presentation. So let me see if I can share it now. Okay. As Ranjit said, I've said navigating the Cold War and keeping trains running in the frontline state of Mozambique. It's basically a look back into history and a trip down memory lane. I've said the Cold War because within India, I told you how we were feeling. But in the outside world, the world was divided between the Western and the Eastern blocs. And that was playing out in the newly emerging countries in Africa. And Mozambique had become just independent and therefore was right in the front line of the independence or movements in South Africa and Rhodesia. And into this whole setup, we were trying to run trains with what was happening. So how was the time? What I've said, it was a time of troubles and a time of opportunity. Why do I say that? It was a time of opportunity. It was a great time in the sense that in the 70s, we had just created Bangladesh. We had exploded the first atomic bomb. We were doing quite great. But then problems started, and then we had the emergency. And then we got out of the emergency, and then we we got the first non Congress government. And that was Morarji Desai. And we felt that perhaps there's going to be new opportunity now, and maybe we'll get over the troubles. But then, what was happening outside? Outside, the world was divided by the Cold War. And you can see the division was in Europe, where the Western Bloc, under the control of under the of the US and Russia on the other side, they were divided together. They were fighting ideologically, and they were trying to bring everybody under their wing. The Cold War, a little bit a digression on how it came about, or those who were not born, many of the people perhaps here, I don't know if they were there in the 70s or very young perhaps. And in the Yalta Conference, after the Second World War in 1945, Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill created the New World Order, which is getting undone now. They set up the United Nations, the World Bank, divided Europe between themselves, and did the Middle East, and also created the State of Israel, which now you see what's happening. And colonialism was giving way, and new countries were coming into being, and the two blocs wanted them to become under their influence. What was India's answer to this? Was the non-aligned movement. Nehru, along with Nkrumah, you can see he was the first president of the first independent state of in Africa, Ghana. There's Nasir, there is Sukarno, and there's Tito. This established a non-aligned movement, and this non-aligned movement was meant to have create a new economic order, a South-South cooperation, and a global South, which would build the new world separated from the Cold War of the two dominant powers. So And it was this sort of thinking that we are going to create a new economic order and we would help the frontline states as their own, that India had also helped Frelimo government to take power in Mozambique. And part of that, of the South-South cooperation, was the Indo-Mozambican Technical Cooperation Agreement, under which I was deputed. So now let's see how the whole thing started. It started in one day when I got a call when I was in RDSO to meet the MM. I call it MM Salam because in Lucknow, when the Parasa wanted to meet you, uh, the Chaprasi would say, बड़े साहब ने आपको सलाम भेजा है, and that's it. And I reached, and I have to mute these. So when I reached there, he gave me a file. Mr. Lal gave me a file. So read this and then come back to me. It was assignment to lead about 30 technicians to maintain diesel locomotives in Mozambique. The Mozambique Technical Cooperation Agreement. It was a government-to-government assignment, not through rights. So that's what it was, and I didn't know if I should take it. Who knows about Mozambique, Portuguese speaking, and financially it was not that attractive. So I went and talked to LK Sinha, who had gone and made the report. And he said, well, you won't regret it, take it. It's quite good. And I think it was quite a good advice. And I took it and I told Mr. Lal that, yeah. So I talked to Mr. Lal and I told him yes. And then he told me, he says, I really don't know you, but I've chose you because you wrote that paper, India's Oil Crisis and Choice of Traction. In 1974, I read him this. India was going through a foreign exchange crisis. It didn't have enough electricity. The world was oil was in a crisis. Prices were going up, and like today, everybody says save carbon, don't pollute the atmosphere. At that time, it was cut down on use of diesel so that we can save foreign exchange. And the idea was that we should electrify the railways. And in this paper, I showed that if you electrify, you're going to use more oil. So it got the Goodall Fund Award, and it also got me chosen for this assignment. And then he told me, he says, okay, you go, but respect them. Don't think you're great, that you know better. Very good advice. And then he says, as a parting shot, he says, don't blame me if I'm sending you to the shit house because nobody has wanted it. So with this statement, I was off to. Now, the reception. I discovered that I was the first Indian expert under the agreement to reach there. At the airport, I was surprised to see that Gurdiyal Singh of the Indian embassy was also there to receive me, apart from the Mozambicans to take me. And he told me, the moment you reach the hotel, go and ring up H.K. Singh, the second secretary. And HK picked me up, uh, took me to his house, gave me dinner, and told me, look, the ambassador was very relieved that you have come. And because he had to make his farewell calls with the president, Samora Michel. And Samora Michel would have asked, you promised experts to come 3 years ago, where are they? So my arrival was a big relief for him. Next day, I was taken to the ambassador. He looked me up and down and he felt, yeah, okay. And he wanted to make it completely public that Indian experts were here. So he held a reception called the diplomatic corps and the foreign ministry people from the Mozambique side made me stand next to him and presented me. So I was thoroughly launched. Then he told me, look, you represent India's political commitment to South-South cooperation. You have to support, of course, keep trains moving. There are a lot of resistance from Renamo to not let trains run. You have to try to keep trains running in spite of that. And also present India as a modern emerging country to the people and to the international community. That is basically a broad task. It had a it had a more of a diplomatic angle than only running trains. Then the ambassador explained the Cold War dynamics playing out currently in Mozambique. Now, you notice this is the area which of interest. There is Angola, which was under the Portuguese. There's Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa. This is the area. Now, if you go back to 1965, on the left side, see what had happened was that South Africa's whites, the Boers, they had nowhere to go. Unlike the whites in Mozambique or Rhodesia or Zambia or anywhere else, they could go back to their home countries. The South African whites had nowhere to go. So they wanted to build a white South Africa. They wanted to make a federation. In fact, South Africa and Rhodesia, at that time, southern Rhodesia, they had built a federation which the Portuguese supported but didn't join. So if you notice one thing, in 65, this orange, where Zambia and Tanzania had become free, green is Rhodesia, and there is this purple on the other side. They were all still colonized, and they wanted to make this into a one white area control. But there were resistance movements carrying on. In 1975, the Portuguese collapsed. The reason was simple. Unlike in India, where British could rely upon Indian revenues to support their forces, in Mozambique, the economy was not big enough to support an army, and everything was coming from Portugal. And they had to support the army here to fight the resistance movements. Ultimately, it had become economically unviable. So in 1975, they just threw up the towel, made Angola and Mozambique independent, and went away. That changed the dynamics completely. So then the ambassador elaborated the view. He said, India has supported liberation movements apart from Mozambique, but also ANC Nelson Mandela and ZANU PF Joshua Nkrumah, who was based in Maputo. And the answer to that by the Rhodesian intelligence agency was to create Renamo to destabilize the Frelimo government. So you had freedom fighters Nelson Mandela, who was in Robben Island prison. There were lots of people in Mozambique there from ANC. I met the one person was an Indian called Naidu. He would talk to me. Joshua Nkrumah was actually based in Mozambique. If they were freedom fighters and they were also spies. All over the place was full of spies. We met them. So there was CIA, there was KGB, actually there was MI6, I didn't find. There was the East Germans, the SNAS people, they were hovering around. The Chinese, all there. In fact, one of the CI guys, he would try to make me get some information and other things from me, which I came to know later. But that's another story. So, so Ambassador set forth the challenges facing Frelimo. Renamo is challenging the government to destabilize it, and Renamo is a proxy of the South Rhodesian government. And your endeavor is, in spite of all this, try to see if you can get trains running. Now, what was happening? What was the Nama doing? They were destroying infrastructure. They were destroying hospitals. They were destroying schools. They were attacking the railway line. And this is Mozambique. It's at basically Mozambique along this area. They have three lines. One in the north from Nakala, Tet into Lilongwe, and Beira into Harare, and Maputo into Kuala into Zimbabwe. And this is the north line running from Nikala into Tet into Lichang, and this was more or less made inoperational. Beira line, which was going into Harare, this was also more or less non-functional. I was based in Maputo, and this line going along to Kuala was going into Zimbabwe. And this was one line going into South Africa. This was allowed to function because there was a mutual dependence of South Africa and Mozambique at that time. But they would try to disrupt movement along this line. And what they would do is that if they couldn't cut off the line, they would destroy locomotives by using rockets. Not very big rockets, but enough to cause damage. So the locomotives became damaged and couldn't operate. So what was my challenge? My challenge was acceptance at all three levels: management, workers, and the political party, and project India. This was my challenge, and how exactly to do it. The opening game, when I was asked to write, and don't forget that it was Portuguese speaking, so I didn't know Portuguese. So that was a good thing because let me keep my mouth shut and observe what was happening. I was sent to Eduardo Mondlane University for 6 months to learn Portuguese. In the meantime, I was observing what was happening. And the opening came and they said, write specifications for shunting locomotives. I had worked in motive power and I had the foresight to bring specifications with me, as also other reports. And therefore, I was able to write the specification and negotiate with the Romanians on the technical terms for the locomotive. They were very pleased with that because they didn't exactly know how to do it. And this picture here shows the locomotives being uh, unloaded at the port. There's me there, other people, the Portuguese, there's the Romanian guy and others. So this was the first thing I was able to do. They were quite pleased by it. Then I would only call it a butterfly, flapping of the butterfly, a butterfly effect took place. And I ended up as becoming head of the diesel group. See, in the workshop, there was the top man of the workshop. Basically, the whites who had stayed back, Portuguese whites who had stayed back, the white Mozambicans, they normally actually were all around in the railways. So this person who headed the workshop one day disappeared, as they say, fugiado, to Portugal, and there was nobody left to run the workshop. And the person sitting here, Luis Philip, who was the head of diesel, he was made the head of workshop, and I took over as head of the diesel group. So interestingly, I was from a corporate or from an advisor. Now I was part of Mozambican management, which had far-reaching consequences. Now, as the minister said, you have to make a political statement that once in a while a train runs. It doesn't mean that you run trains every day, but you have to show to the world that Renamo won't be able to stop us from running trains. So, as I told you, the locomotives used to get damaged. So they would damage about 2 locomotives a month. I would repair to how we had a boiler repair section, boiler repair section, which was doing nothing. I had my people and I got them to set up a group who would repair whatever damage was done. So we had a great war of iteration that they would damage to, I would repair to, which was quite a good political statement. And there wasn't much. See, the idea was the train running was not a big thing. This was this sort of thing which you had to do. Then came another interesting thing, which of course by then established me very well. When I opened up the engines, I found that they were full of cold temperature deposits. Since I had done the work in RDS, so I knew oils very well. And so I looked at them and I said, good God, this is cold temperature deposit. The oil which they're selling is not up to mill B level, mill 214B level. It's wrong. So I called the British Petroleum head who was supplying the oil. I said, you're supplying an oil which is inferior to global levels. He got upset. He says, we're an international company. How dare you say things like that? And I just sent the oil to South Africa for analysis, and the analysis came back, and sure enough, it showed that the oil the additive package was not up to standard. What this person was doing, they had a blending plant, so they used to import the neutral and the additive package and blend it in America, in Maputo, and sell the oil. Since there was a problem of foreign exchange, what he was doing was trying to create a larger quantity by reducing the amount of additive, thinking that it's a hot country. Why should cold temperature deposits come? He forgot that the engines were idling all the time. So this happened, and then it became quite a thing. He tried to tell me to keep quiet, which of course I couldn't. I told the management, and I don't know, we had talks, and then General Electric was called, GE, they agreed, yes, they were deposits, and BP Shell compensated quietly by giving $1 million worth of spares. This, of course, within the Mozambican establishment, my name, of course, was known quite well. And the British Petroleum guys were very free of me. And we had to get accepted by the workers. Being a Jamalpur guy was very big helpful because we can go around with the workers. I couldn't speak Portuguese, but even then we carried on very well. Incident took place, which of course got me respected completely. We lost a crankshaft. One of the connecting rods broke, and the counterweight was bent. I had no crankshaft, and we had no money to get one. So either I lose an engine or I do something about it. I did something which in India perhaps they won't let me do. I just heated the crankshaft and straightened it out by a double-edged thread nut. Here you can see, and it worked. And the crankshaft worked, and that was great. So much on my end. So I had got acceptance from the management. I had got acceptance from the workers, but acceptance by the political party. It was a Marxist-Leninist state where everything people who were heading the position like mine had to be members of the political party. So when I was made, I told the minister, but I cannot be aligned with the party. I'm a political guy. I have to be. He said, don't worry, you are a bureaucrat on the government of India employee. You're fine. So we don't mind. But still, at every meeting, the party used to sit. So you had to go along with them. So then what happened was that there was the fourth Congress, which is the Filimo Party's fourth convention. And what they had was that you have to help the convention to succeed. How do you help them? By doing extra work beyond what you normally do. So they told me, Engineer Singh, what will Group Diesel do? I said, I will give you an extra locomotive. They were quite aghast. They said, how can that be? He said, don't worry, I'll do it. I had gone to the yard and I found an underframe with bogies, and I had gone around the port and I was walking around. I found that an engine with diesel generator had been imported and forgotten. So I had a locomotive, I had an underframe, I had an engine, I had a generator, I had bogies, I had enough spare traction motors and compressors and all that. So I got my Indian team boys and the Mozambican, and I said, let's start putting this locomotive together. So we made a locomotive, and it was presented. It was it was taken. Such a thing was taken that it was they laid a line from the station out into front of the fire, the entrance to the main station, for the whole of Maputo to see what had been done. I was in the newspapers, and I was glorified in that sense. I've lost the original paper in which there was, but there was another paper which uh, indicated what was done. And it's in Portuguese, but what it basically says that Singh, you can see Singh here, was glorified in the Fourth Congress for the recuperation of the locomotive which was abandoned earlier out of circulation. So my turban had helped. Everyone knew, and this was something which had now made me completely acceptable to the party. So we were always doing in the papers something which is very simple, actually, but it became big news. When I was in RDSO, I was trying to make motor power agree that if you want, let's reduce the idling RPM of the diesel engine, because the first notch and idle RPM are the same. When engines idle, if you reduce the RPM, but they'll consume less fuel, maybe we'll start saving fuel. But of course, I was not allowed to do it. This is what will happen, this and that. So I I did that, and when I went there, I was saying, okay, let's do that. Newspaper correspondent happened to be in the workshop, saw me what I was doing, and said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm going to change the solenoids and reduce the RPM to save some fuel." He saw this and he made a big news out of it. So I'm in the papers. You can see Comprant engineer Arjun Singh, Indiano, Indian service of CFM Sul has done this sort of thing. So by then I was taking ministers around. Minister of Botswana came, it was all being reported in the press. SATCC, the South Africa Transport Coordinating Committee, was there and they headquartered there, and ministers used to come. And they used to meet, and I used to go around. For example, he says, Department of Agnes Singh continue to explain to Minister of Botswana what all is being done, and etc., etc., etc. I also mentioned Indira Gandhi should join SATCC. Then Mozambique, Rhodesia became, Zimbabwe became free, and we had to take, and I was asked to take, given the honor of taking the first train into independent Zimbabwe. Here is the train, there I am, and we signed on their flag. I don't know where that is gone. I couldn't take more photographs because there was all this enormous, problems of security. not only were you had to be accepted in work, you had to become part of the social system. So this is a party in our house. This is the head of Mozambican Railways, Frera Mendes. That's his wife, Lay. So we were fully integrated into their society, social system, let's say. India was frontline state, very important. South Africa is still to become free. Zimbabwe is still to become free. So there were a lot of visits. That time Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the foreign minister. He made a visit. And yeah, that's me. And then Indira Gandhi came. Here she is on the main cover of their magazine. First steps for cooperation. And I was introduced to Indira Gandhi as an Indian who has become a Mozambican. That is the amount of integration we were able to achieve. And Indira Gandhi was very keen to see our work. So she specially asked that she be shown around. Now you can see here, that's me. That's the ambassador. The Virdi, incidentally, happened to be we were friends from school. And they were Wright's team had come in by then. There's L.K. Mathur there, and there was Satish. Yeah, here it is. L.K. Mathur, Satish Bahl, myself, he's the head of workshop, the Virdi. So when Indira Gandhi came, the rights people said, we are senior to him. We'll take her around, not him. So they said, uh, no, he is our man. You are only corporals. And he takes everybody around, he will take Indira Gandhi around. So Indira Gandhi was very pleased. She gave me a shabash. She said, I am pleased with your work. You have my good wishes. She was getting into the car. She got out, she looked around and told me that. So I felt that the mandate given to me was fulfilled. India's political commitment to South-South cooperation, I tried to achieve and show that. I tried to keep trains running and also showed that we were a modern emerging country to the Mozambican people. We had to show to the international community, and I'll show how that was. Projecting India at the diplomatic level. Here is Dobell of Britain. That's me, and that's the Chinese ambassador. He started off at the second secretary level. We reached up to the ambassadors. As the German ambassador, she's British second secretary, she's American, and this is Juliet. She's the wife of Edward Monley, who is considered as the father of the nation. She's American. She was married to him. He set up Frelimo and was meant to be the creator of this country. He was assassinated in a letter bomb. To be seen on the same table with someone like this means that you have in a way arrived. So this was at the formal level, but we were also accepted at the informal level. It's a fancy dress party, me trying to act as an Arab, and that's the Yugoslavian ambassador. So 2 years I had gone for, it became 6, and ultimately I had to leave. So there was a farewell party given by the ambassador. This is the that is the tremendous head of the railways, his wife is singing. Yes, Tiwari of Indian Railway Rights. He is Modi's Egyptian ambassador. He is the head of General Manager of Southern Railway, Elidio Danish. in the sound system, then relaxing out of the party. Gurdeep and me. So, what were the key takeaways? Soft skills, important English, and keeping ear to the ground. Well, soft skills were very important for getting into the social system. Learning their behavior patterns, conversation, and entertainment. We didn't know much of the way, we didn't know much about wines and things like that because nobody used to do that drink in those days. We learned all that. So, anybody goes, you have to integrate, talk, and learn. English, importance of English. My knowledge of English actually helped me because there was Portuguese speaking, surrounded by English speaking papers. Contracts are all in English. Once they realized my English was good, I was asked so often, where do you learn your English? And I said, well, it was in India. They would be very surprised. And it gave me an edge in everything. So I feel, I don't know why we're dumbing down English in India, but this is a big advantage and we must build on it. Keeping the ear to the ground, everything happens in the outside world. For example, in the diplomatic world and all, when we would move, you come to know what's happening. Diplomacy is all about knowing what is happening. And parties are where information is exchanged. That's the whole thing. And I'll give you a little example. When I went on work to Zimbabwe, and as I was getting off the plane, uh, on the tarmac, I met Anwar Khan, who was the Pakistan ambassador. He had been the Pakistan ambassador in Mozambique. That's how we knew him. And the first question he asked me, what are you doing here? I said, I've come for work. He says, oh, well, why don't you come and have lunch with me? I don't know what it was. So I talked to the Indian High Commissioner and I said, Anwar Khan asked me for lunch. What is he wanting? Tell me. He says, we are trying to get Indian Railways into Zimbabwe, and so are the Pakistanis. So I'm sure he thinks you've come for that, so he wants to know something from you. So I said, should I go for lunch? He says, go. Uh, I try to find out what he's doing and let me know. And sure enough, that's what it was. So we discovered that diplomatic parties were actually work. They were all trying to find something or the other and keeping ear to the ground, and it would help you. And I think one of the big failures to the mechanical department is, or the railways, is that we have not kept our ears to the ground. I started off by saying that in 77 we were the key department. And today, where we have reached, I think, is something which we have to question ourselves. And if we had kept ears to the ground, maybe we could have changed in time and not reached where the stage where we were. Here we have come. Thank you very much. This is what I had to say. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much for that fascinating talk, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. I'll open the floor to questions.
I would like to ask one question. First of all, thank you very much, Sas, for a very illuminating discourse on the state of affairs globally at that time and the role that you played. Now, the Cold War is, and in fact, Thomas Friedman has mentioned in one of his books that it's not even the post Cold War that we are confronting now, but it is the post Cold War situation. Where do you think the African subcontinent is in that context, and what is India's role on the stage as you see it?
And I don't. It's a very tough question to answer. Viren. The problem with Africa is they are very tribal. Even today, they're tribal. It's therefore they are not able to really fully become modern. You can help them, but unless they are able to get out of their tribal identities and become a national identity, they are going to have problems of adjusting. I don't know how India can help, and I really don't know how to answer this question, really, except to say that these, the African societies have to evolve to more modern societies. Tribalism is the problem. To a certain extent, we have that in India too, because we also have types of tribalism, castes and this, that. But we have come a long way. And if we have problems here today, it's partly because re-establishing tribal identities. And their tribal identities actually stop them from becoming modern states. And I really don't know how we can help, except that we ourselves set an example of how we got it out of tribalism.
I agree with your basic analysis. However, the issue still is that the world over, we are finding that there is a reversion to isolationism, which is a form of tribalism. And that is a huge challenge that we are all collectively facing as a world. And what do you think should be India's response to this? Because right now we're not setting a good example.
We're not setting a good example. Also, its question is that the old economics is dying out. The old economics method of working is dying out. It is not a challenge from the sustainability point of view. The system is not able to give a fair distribution of wealth around with the people. And though the tragedy is that the technology is there to make everybody well off, but distribution is not proper. And the market mechanisms which we are using of the old economics don't seem to be working so well. And we therefore have to have a new way of looking at economics, new way of analyzing how development is taking place and linking it up with the new technologies coming from AI and because every technology comes in and creates its new world order. The geography of production changes the geography of social structure. You can see that as railwaymen, the 19th century technology of the railways redid the complete productive geography of production and the social structure. The factory system disrupted trade. In India, when the railways came, they disrupted the whole of the existing social order, interrelationships. And we still haven't fully recovered from that disruption. Uh, Now we're getting AI and others, they're going to further disrupt. So I think it's a reaction to this disruption, which we do not know how to handle, that there is an inward looking look towards tribalism. And, and therefore, we need now a totally new economic order. And even the politicians at the moment don't have a very good idea how to go about how to do that. They have no answer to the liberal thinking which was there.
I think that's a very good analysis that you've just given us. Right now, I think the tendency is to take a wrecking ball to the existing institutional structures.
Yeah.
Mr. Mathur, please go ahead. You raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Saz, I have a slightly different question. You know, with your going there, you established a certain degree of rapport at all levels of the working levels of the railways. Have we built on that and expanded that and kept going? Because, you know, once you open such a valuable channel of communication, you must build on it and keep it going, or have we let it atrophy?
You see, the rights came in, of course. Because of that, they went more front right. Now, the problem with rights, and I kept telling rights when they were there, that your job, you're trying to look at it totally as a railway-oriented job. It's not, because I told you the situation, the political situation which existed at that time. In any case, if you see the railway lines in Mozambique, they were not really serving Mozambique. They were going from one port inside, into and three of them separately isolated. And I told them, you must understand that you have to be in line with the political thought and how the railways fits in, and don't try to bring in Indian ways of running railways there. Unfortunately, the problem with rights was that they looked at it as a business proposition rather than as a political statement. They were interested in making some money and sending people, and and the and the soft skills they were not willing to learn. So they were in Bara and all. They had problems.
Didn't China outbid India, sir?
Chinese were in
Mozambique.
no, they see in Mozambique there were various sectors. Sectors had been given away. See, in this Cold War setup, the the Mozambicans were in the Soviet camp. Now, the Russians basically decided what's going to happen. The East Germans had the security services called SNASP, which they created. The Russians were there as watchdogs. There was one Russian in my workshop also who used to keep a watch of what's happening. We were acceptable to the Russians. So then we were happy. He would come to me once in a while and say, Engineer Singh, like 26 January, he came and told me, Engineer Singh, long live the Republic of India. I'd forgotten actually. So I suddenly said, why the hell is he saying that? I realized it was 26 January. So I had to say, long live the Union of Soviet Union and all that sort of thing. So they were there, the East Germans were there, there were Hungarians there, there were uh, all types of nations there. They were given different areas. The Chinese were actually given the toughest. They were up in Nakala and they were working in the bush. They were growing their own food also. I mean, that sort of thing. Indians won't be able to do that. But they weren't in the railway. Railway sector was given to India. And that's how the whole area was divided.
How many years did you spend there, sir?
I went for 2, became 6. He wouldn't let me go because there was a tacit knowledge involved. Filing system तो है नहीं था. English I used to speak. I was part. So I was there in all sorts of meetings. I was sent to Romania and other places for on behalf of Mozambique. In fact, I used to even attend some diplomatic parties. And I remember the Indian ambassador asking this Francis Vaz, our second secretary, what the hell is Sarabjit doing here? And he told him, sir, he is representing Mozambique. That was the situation. So me going away, I take a lot of the tacit knowledge. Ultimately, India, the ambassador talked to the Kantra Santosh, the Minister for Railways, okay, you have to let him go. So he said, well, if India can't do without him, you're a sovereign country, I have to let him go. But they weren't very keen. He would take me around everywhere. So that was the situation.
Your team, sir?
My team, they were there also. And
All came back together.
I came back and I don't really remember when did they come back. They also came back at that time, yeah.
One would have thought the Cold War got over in 1990 when the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah, that's the time when. But we're having a new war now, no?
But I feel the Ukraine war is an extension of the Cold War. It's nothing else. It's become a hot war.
No, it's you have to understand there is something called the Mackindle's heartland theory. So this is the control of Central Asia and the Caucasians of Europe. The heartland theory, Mackindle's heartland theory, basically states that the Europe and Asia, if you combine together, are a global island. And whoever controls this global island controls the world. And to control the world, then you have to control the heartland. The heartland is the Caucasian and the Central Asian part. So the NATO's push is to keep getting towards the heartland. The Chinese from this side are trying to get into the heartland through their belt and this thing. So this and the Russians who used to control this area are weakening, and China is trying to push. So Ukraine is part of the Western Bloc to have say in this area.
Control over Central Asia.
Yeah, because but then of course the Americans had come out with the spike in the rim theory, that if we cannot control the heartland, we can control the rim, and around the rim you have all countries under your influence. Pakistan was part of that rim, and trying to do the Vietnam War and North Korea and Japan, you control the rim, and India is meant to help in controlling the rim. I had a very interesting conversation with the American Shajeh. We were talking, and he says, I said, why are you supporting dictatorships like Pakistan and others? Why don't you support India? You keep to be a great democratic country. So he said, uh, uh, what has India done for us? I said, well, India has kept the communists away without you having to do it right now. He really didn't have anything to say. If you look at today's world, the Americans are trying to get you into this rim to and control what is happening through China and Soviet Union.
The US needs India to control China.
Yes, to counter China, because after all, when the British Empire was there, India was surrogate, and they used it from straits along the Red Sea down to the states of Malacca. So yeah.
There may be others, sir, wanting to ask some question.
So Mr. Aman has asked that your point about keeping your ears to the ground seems to me as the most important lesson here. That's how we can remain relevant. Coming from relatively younger generation, I feel we did fail to adapt to the changing. Yes, I totally agree with you, because if we had kept our ears to the ground, we would have realized that the ground was shifting. We would have realized that in any mode of transport, the mobile mode, that is the mobile mode, like the aeroplanes, ships, cars, buses, rolling stock, they are all commercially viable propositions, and hence they are in the private sector. So we who had created the rolling stock industry and manufacturing in India, if we had kept our ears to the ground and know how the dynamics between the politics and industry was going on, we would have moved towards focusing on creating a globalized rolling stock industry. We would also realize that our role within the railways was getting limited, because the steam locomotive could not be run. And as J.L. Singh had shown in his last talk, that how you could not run a steam locomotive without total mechanical engineers' participation. Whereas it's not true for diesel locos. As you will remember that in the olden days, when you had these old ambassador cars, you have to keep checking dipstick by oil and water and all that. In today's cars, I don't think anybody even knows that water and oil exist. You just get into it and drive. So if we had understood that, then we would today have been very much a powerful role, building a whole rolling stock industry, which is of international level like the Chinese have done. I think that has been our biggest failure. And if we can get our acts together, maybe we can still do it.
Chopper has raised his hand. Please go ahead.
I don't have a question to SAS, but I would like to respond to a question Mr. Vinay Sahgal had asked about what should be India's response to the situation in Africa. And my response is that India has to first set its own house in order before it can think of responding to global events or global situations. Because I think unless you are clear about yourself within yourself, it is impossible to do anything outside. This has been sort of happened in international marketing, global affairs. You have to be internally strong and cohesive before you can go out and do anything outside. And I think we are lacking in that area. Thank you.
Sandeep, I agree with you entirely. The issue is that we seem to be sliding backwards. But it's not that we are isolated in the global scenario, because every nation appears to be becoming more and more isolationist. Immigration, for example, in the last US election has become a dirty word. And more nations are today trying to become more and more isolationist. So it's a huge challenge as to what is the appropriate global response to this and how does India respond to this?
So my submission only is that yes, I totally agree. There is a global trend towards isolation and so on. Now, I believe we are part of that trend. And I also believe that trend is wrong. But you can only counter that if your own actions do what you want others to do. For us to keep telling other countries not to be isolationist and to be isolationists within our internal functioning is doesn't stand to logic. And any other country in the world, whatever they may say what about us in diplomatic terms or international fora. The world knows what is happening here. So therefore, we cannot logically and sustainably go around and telling the world not to be isolationist.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jagdeep. The only issue is two things, in my opinion. One is that there is an ideological vacuum world. Communism, as we know it, has failed as a system. Fascism has failed as a system. So that is one angle to all this. But the biggest issue is the economic pie, because as long as the pie was growing in the late uh, years of the last century, we thought that, capitalism had come to stay. But suddenly globalism or globalization has become a dirty word. The disparities between the rich and poor are increasing. Then this is one reason why there is a global angst against established government systems and institutions.
So
Yeah,
at the risk of prolonging the argument, I will only say there's an old saying in Hindi, पहले अपने घर में दिया जलाया जाता है, फिर गली में जलाया जाता है.
Yeah, I just add to that.
I have only one quick comment, both to Jagdeep and to Vinay, and that is that, as we've been growing closer to the US, we are learning from them how to be hypocritical and to have two completely different standards, one for the world and one for yourself. So, as they say, do as I tell you, but not as I do. So that's one unfortunate situation where nobody is thinking along the lines that both of you are talking logically and sensibly. Today, the whole objective is to win an election, and everything else is subsidiary to that. Sad fact.
Agree.
I apologize, sir, Mr. Mathur.
It is just like the discussion is like in the lounge session. It used to be. That's the nice thing. It.
I have a question,
Yeah.
or rather a suggestion. You know, this cooperation with Mozambique has continued for a number of years, and recently, or maybe not so recently, we had Rudola of 75 batch working in Mozambique. If you could invite him to give us a talk on what he found or how they are managing. And incidentally, that post or that assignment was hotly contested and supposed to be a very prestigious assignment. Secondly, what did you do with your family? I didn't see. I saw only one picture of your dear wife. Where were the kids?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, we were talking about what I did to the Mozambique Railways. I mean, we're not talking about my family. Yes, the kids were there. Simran was born in Mozambique, actually. She was a kid. Chitwan, and Chitwan was a kid. So we went. I mean, that's a way. They had a great time too. We had a great time. Yeah. It was a very big learning experience. What it did to us is changed us completely because we now saw the world at a different level. And we realized that in understanding what's happening in geopolitics and outside is important. That's why I said big thing is you must keep your ear to the ground. And in the Indian Railways, we tend to be very inbred because our colonies, our work, our Indian Railways environment is so inclusive that you don't even have to go out. And that is, I think, one of the biggest failings because it's got everything. You can live in your colonies, you have your hospitals, you have your work, you have your schools. And even if you get posted anywhere, you go from one colony to another colony, life remains more or less the same. So having to break out of that all-encompassing railway environment and see what the outside world, that is the important, and that's the lesson we learned there.
Now, coming back to the USA, I believe Henry Kissinger said, enmity with the USA is dangerous. Friendship with USA is fatal. That's he's supposed to have said that. I don't know. Incidentally, I was told Botswana is doing quite well in spite of the tribalism. They have sort of much higher standard of living and much better human development indices than the countries surrounding them.
Yeah. They're a very small country with large resources. They have diamonds. So they have enough money.
Well, we have Rajiv Chandra in Botswana, who's been living there for more than 25 years. Maybe we can ask him to join us one of these days and ask him.
Thank you so very much, sir. Thank you for this lovely talk. We will try. Thankful to Mr. Anand also. I'll try and get in touch with Rodola. He's in Dehradun. And let's see if we can follow up on the African scene in our lounge session in the future. Thank you once again. Thank you, everybody.